It started with the sound of my phone buzzing at midnight. The alert from my security system lighting up my screen with a warning, unauthorized access detected. At first I thought it was a glitch. Maybe a neighbor's Wi-Fi messing with the sensors. But when I switched to the live feed, the image stopped me cold. A lanky teenager in a hoodie was crouched at the gate to my backyard pool, fiddling with the electronic keypad of my smart lock. His face tilted up just enough for the camera to catch, and I recognized him instantly. Ethan, the teenage son of Karen, our HOA president. The same Karen who had spent months hounding me over every little detail, from the color of my shutters to the angle of my security cameras. I didn't move right away. I wanted evidence. So I let the recording roll, my pulse hammering as Ethan tugged uselessly at the gate, cursing under his breath when the lock beeped red. Then, in a move so absurd it felt unreal, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Through the feed, I could hear his voice carrying into the night. "Help. I'm locked out. This guy put up some illegal system, and I can't get in." He didn't even realize the pool wasn't his to begin with. He was trespassing, and he had just called the cops on himself. By the time I stepped outside, the blue and red lights were already painting the street. 2 squad cars pulled up, their radios crackling, officers stepping out with the weary look of men summoned on a false alarm. Karen stormed down the sidewalk behind them, robe flapping, hair wild, her face twisted with righteous fury. She pointed at me like a judge delivering sentence. "That man is a menace to this community. He's barricaded his property with illegal technology and trapped my son outside by the pool." Her words were venom. But what made the scene even more surreal was Ethan still clutching the gate, as though he was the victim and not the intruder. The officers looked between us, confusion thick in the night air. One of them asked flatly, "Ma'am, is this your pool?" That was my moment. I held up my phone, the screen glowing with the live feed from just 10 minutes earlier, the footage of Ethan forcing at the lock, muttering about breaking in, then dialing 911 as if he had been wronged. The officers leaned in, their faces hardening with each second of the video. When the clip ended with Ethan's ridiculous, illegal system claim, the taller officer turned to Karen, his voice sharp. "Your son trespassed on private property and then wasted emergency resources with a false report. That's a crime." Karen's face flushed a violent red. She stammered, No. You don't understand. This is community property by HOA statute." But the officer cut her off, shaking his head. "This property is clearly private. We've had enough of these calls. Ma'am, your son is coming with us tonight." The moment the cuffs clicked around Ethan's wrists, Karen shrieked like a wounded animal. She lunged at the officer, screaming about bylaws and her authority. But her voice was drowned out by the neighbors spilling out onto their porches, drawn by the flashing lights. They'd had their own run-ins with her, and now they saw the queen of the HOA throne flailing in the street, exposed for what she really was. The twist came when my neighbor Mrs. Patel, usually quiet and reserved, stepped forward with her phone raised high. "I've been recording too," she announced, her voice trembling but steady. "Every time she's harassed me for my garden. Every time she's fined me for things not in the rules. Tonight, the whole truth comes out." She played back clip after clip, the officers listening intently as Karen's voice filled the night, ordering, threatening, mocking. What had started as her attempt to frame me flipped into an avalanche of evidence against her. Standing there, I watched Karen's empire crumble, not because of me, but because of the voices she had tried to silence. My smart lock had caught her son, but the neighborhood had caught her. And for the first time, the balance of power shifted from her clipboard to our cameras, from her threats to our truth. The officers called for backup. Not for me, but for her. The image of Karen being forced into the back of a cruiser while her son sobbed on the curb was one I'll never forget. It wasn't just justice for Mike, it was vindication for everyone she had tormented. As the cruiser doors slammed and Ethan sat inside, his wrists bound, Karen's shrieks filled the night, carrying farther than the flashing lights. She begged, threatened, and promised revenge in the same breath, her voice cracking like glass. The neighbors who gathered didn't rally behind her this time. They shook their heads, whispering with the kind of disbelief that only comes when a tyrant finally stumbles. For so long, she had been the voice that rang louder than all of us. But now the silence that followed her words was the sound of her power slipping away. The officers didn't stop at arresting her son. With Mrs. Patel's recordings and my security footage, they had more than enough to escalate. Karen herself was detained that very night, her hands cuffed behind her back as she screamed about bylaws and executive authority. The words sounded pathetic now, stripped of their meaning. Her eyes darted frantically, searching for even one sympathetic face among her neighbors. None were found. The very people she had mocked, fined, and belittled stood stone-faced, some even filming on their phones, ensuring her downfall would be remembered beyond the streetlights. The days that followed were a storm, not for us, but for her. Local news picked up the story within hours. HOA president's son arrested for trespass and false 911 call, and by evening, it was the talk of the county. The footage of Ethan struggling at my smart lock, followed by Karen screaming at police officers, played on a loop. Suddenly, our quiet neighborhood was the backdrop of a scandal that echoed far past property lines. And then came the twist that sealed her fate. Another neighbor, Mr. Lynn, revealed he had once worked in IT and managed to pull months of public security audio records through legal request. What he uncovered was chilling. Karen had instructed her son before to use the system against them, meaning me, Mrs. Patel, and others. The 911 call wasn't some teenage tantrum. It was part of her plan to weaponize law enforcement against homeowners who resisted her. With that revelation, the case shifted from trespass and false report into conspiracy and abuse of authority. The courtroom months later was a theater of irony. Karen, who once presided over every lawn length and mailbox color with a clipboard in hand, now sat in a defendant's chair, her presence diminished under fluorescent lights. Her son, pale and shaken, testified reluctantly about the night, admitting he was told he had the right to enter any property the HOA claimed. Each word was another nail in her coffin. Neighbors one by one stood, voices breaking as they described years of harassment. By the time Mrs. Patel played the last recording, showing Karen mocking her accent and threatening fines for her flower beds, the jury looked ready to convict before deliberations even began. When the guilty verdict was read, Karen collapsed into her chair. Fraud, conspiracy, false reporting, misuse of law enforcement resources. She had built her kingdom on intimidation, and it crumbled the moment the truth was dragged into the light. The sentence was harsh: 5 years for the crimes, restitution for the families she targeted, permanent ban from any future HOA leadership. The gavel came down not just as punishment, but as closure. But what mattered more wasn't Karen's fallout, was what rose after her. Without her chokehold, the neighborhood transformed. The HOA was dissolved by court order, replaced with a voluntary community association where residents worked together instead of against each other. The pool, once the center of so much conflict, became a gathering place. Its gates secure, but its waters open to laughter, barbecues, and summer afternoons shared. The smart lock that had caught Ethan became a symbol, not of walls or exclusion, but of the right to protect what is yours against those who would abuse power. Grandpa, who had stayed quiet through much of the ordeal, summed it up best one evening as we sat on the porch watching neighbors share food across yards that had once been divided by fear. It takes only one tyrant to turn community into prison, he said. But it takes courage, truth, and unity to turn it back again. His words hung in the twilight, a reminder that justice isn't loud or showy, it is steady, patient, and inevitable. Karen thought she could rewrite the rules to suit herself, that her son's false call could twist reality. Instead, she wrote her own ending, one where the neighborhood she ruled turned its back and history etched her as a warning. We didn't just survive her way, rebuilt stronger because of her downfall. And now I ask you, after hearing it all, was Karen's punishment enough? Or should people who abuse power like this face even harsher consequences?